everyone. My name is Christy O'Malonic. I go by the pronouns she, her. I am the Network Engagement Manager here at the Children in Nature Network. Thanks for joining us. I am enjoying your garden memories in the chat. When I was a child, both sets of my grandparents had gardens, and I did not even remember this until I started working on this event. I was not really active in helping them. It was more like, Christy, move over, you're standing on some rutabaga. But I do remember that those were the best tasting tomatoes I have ever had. So I'm glad you're all here. Welcome to our Just Grow Gardening with Kids event, a part of our Families Together in Nature series. Families Together in Nature provides both inspiration and practical tips for getting more outdoor activities onto the family calendar and more of nature's benefits into the lives of children. I am joining you today from the land of the Munsee Lenape people in central New Jersey. We invite you to share the native land you are on in the chat and recognize the joy, healing, and genocide that Indigenous peoples have endured who are still here and thriving since colonization. If you are not familiar with the history of your location, you can learn about Indigenous territories and lands with the native land map that we're sharing in the chat. And here are some ways that you can go beyond a land acknowledgement and support Indigenous people every day. You can learn about whose Indigenous homelands you're on and normalize land acknowledgements, educate yourself on Indigenous issues, amplify Indigenous social media accounts and reshare and amplify Indigenous voices year-round, and support Indigenous causes and businesses. Before we get started, I'm going to go over some other event logistics. Closed captioning has been enabled. Please use the Q&A for any questions for panelists near the end of the event. And the chat is enabled for attendees to connect. Feel free to comment. It is now my pleasure to welcome and introduce our speakers. First, we have Kashon DuBose. Kashon is the founder and executive director of Cultivators, a nonprofit that provides in-school, after-school, and community center programming for elementary and middle school students, which we will hear more about. A father of two, Kashon strives to create a comfortable environment for children, allowing them to express their interests in a safe space. He has experienced the power of nature in supporting his own emotional health and is passionate about sharing that with Bronx youth in his community. Thank you for joining us today, Kashon.
Thank you, Christy. I couldn't have wrote that better. Thank you. So I'm Kashon DuBose. I come to you for the native land of the Lenape people, but it's present day called the Bronx. And yeah, I'm just here to share my story. And is this the part where I go into it, or do we just where do you want me to go
Hold
ahead?
that thought, and I'll
Okay,
introduce Sonya.
gotcha. Okay.
Thanks. And we have Sonya Harris. Sonya is a master gardener, former special education teacher, and founder of the award-winning Bullock Children's Garden in Glassboro, New Jersey, just about 2 hours south of me. She established the nonprofit, the Bullock Garden Project, to assist schools and community organizations who serve youth who are at risk, receive special education services, and or are low income or food insecure to establish gardens. These gardens not only teach across the curriculum, but inspire careers as future green industry leaders. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Sonya's passions include spending time gardening with children, teaching others how to grow healthy food at home, and helping educators learn how to incorporate garden-based education throughout the curriculum. I love your Instagram, NJ Garden Teacher. It's informative and fun. Thank you for being with us today, Sonya. I think Sonya has a little bit of a lag.
Day.
Oh.
Greetings from the land of the Lenape Nanticoke in South Jersey.
Great, thanks, Sonya. I know that we're going to get into all the amazing things that you guys are currently doing with Cultivators and the Bullock Children's Garden. But before we get started on that, I am curious to know how you both got into gardening. If you could share a little bit about who or what planted that seed in you, and I apologize in advance for all of the gardening puns I am going to throw out today. And like our chat prompt, was it an experience that you had in childhood or later in life? Kashon, can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. So I would say that my experience came later in life. I used to work for a charter school here in the Bronx. And in the school, we were tasked to build just a small garden space, kind of on a terrace. So large building, about 8 stories, 8 floors, excuse me. But it was just a very small garden. And I tell the story all the time. It feels repetitive, but it's one that really strikes with me when it comes to this work that I'm doing. And we had this student who kind of was like always a topic of like leadership conversations in terms of behavioral issues. At one point, I was outside just on a call, listening to listening to a call or something like that, and I seen the same student outside, and I watched this student who I just saw last week, kind of in some like troubled behavior, be a totally different version of himself. I mean, he was, there was like some bees, flowing around, and he was like smiling and laughing and giggling. I watched him like digging in the dirt with his hands and laughing. And the same kid that I saw last week running around the hallways was a totally different student outside. So for me, I talked to like the science teacher at the school about this, just kind of giving him the story, and he said to me, "Well, this he said that there's something common about nature. There's something common about gardening." And was kind of breaking it down to me in a scientific way and said that this practice goes all the way back to like ancient Egypt. So for me, when I get an idea, I'll start to kind of like go down a whole rabbit hole. So I found myself, checking out books in the library, watching YouTube videos, doing my own research, and then during around that same time COVID happened, I kind of decided just to build my own garden in my backyard, a small 6 by 6 foot garden. And in addition to joining the community garden, that to me was it. Like that, I felt like I had missed a whole part of my life of not experiencing nature the way I should. But it was that moment where, for me, that bug of just gardening was hit me. Like even before this call, I was outside just measuring, the space to where I need to put my crops and my pollinators and things like that. So for me, it was later in life, but it was an experience I never forget. And it's weird because a lot of people are more blessed because they have large spaces to do this type of work. And in New York City, we're limited because they're super focused on like building buildings. Like everybody needs a building. But to find that small terrace in the school, that small idea is what prompted this work that I'm doing now.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Sonia, how about you? How did you get into gardening?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Don't know if you can hear me. I'm kind of moving. I think outside is not exactly a great place to sit at the moment. All right, thank you. Thank you. I also got into gardening really late. I never wanted to be that kid or that person who was in the dirt, getting dirty. And as a special education teacher, I just needed something to connect with my kids who didn't want to go outside, didn't want to play. And as a mom, I was like, you have to go outside and play. We have to play at recess. And there was just a math lesson one day that, it wasn't great. It was a really boring lesson. You're giving kids, first graders, tape measures and telling them to go measure your friend's arm, go measure a book, go measure the table. And there was no follow through. There was no real connection for these kids. And I was a special educator. So, my whole thing is you have to find some type of relevance to make this something that kids are going to remember it, because they weren't going to see that measuring lesson until third grade. And I just happened to go, it'd be great let's do a garden. I had zero garden experience. And thankfully, thanks to a lot of wonderful people and a lot of donors, we were able to build a garden. I learned all about gardening so much that, joke's on me, I retired in 2019 so I could run my nonprofit full time, where I got to help other people grow. And now not only do I garden, I was able to be a master gardener. I went back and got my degree in sustainable agriculture, sustainable horticulture, and I'm also farming. So it completely took over everything that I knew. I love it. I'm passionate about it. And I'm really passionate about our children having these opportunities and returning literally and figuratively to our roots. And I think it's especially important for children who look like me, who may not get many opportunities to engage with the outdoors. So I'm really passionate about doing lessons, and we do free lessons for different organizations working with children of color. So thank you.
Great. First of all, that story was so inspiring. I got goosebumps. Was that kind of your, getting your class to measure and, starting that garden? Was that kind of your jumping off point for starting your nonprofit?
Yes, absolutely. I felt it was, something that made sense so kids could watch how plants grew. And I'm like, we can put the meter sticks in the ground. We can have the kids observe things on a weekly basis so they could see how measurement changed according to plants and how slow it is and the patience that it takes, but still that there is some type of visual differentiation for them. And once we started the garden, it just went wild, because at that time in 2014, 2015, in the Garden State in New Jersey, gardens were pretty exclusively private schools. So the fact that I was doing it in a public school, and I'm going to use the air quotes, in a at-risk public school, and I was determined to figure out how we could incorporate it into the curriculum. So my building was first, second, and third grade. I started writing lessons for my colleagues. I started writing lessons for the school on different ways to incorporate the garden throughout the curriculum so they could do it. They stayed on task with what the district was expecting. And from there, we had a lot of teachers ask, how did you do this? How did you get it past your board? How are you getting the permission to teach garden lessons? So I started the nonprofit so we could originally help teachers, because if I needed donations, or a teacher needed gloves or soil or pots, it was so much easier for me to say, donate it to, give it to us at Bullock Garden Project. We'll donate, these 5 things to a district. So the teacher's only having to put in one letter to the board. We know the cost, and it was so much easier to get the permission to keep these things through a school board. And that's how we started. And once COVID hit, we had to change because schools weren't in session. So we made a huge move to teaching virtually, to teaching at community organizations, and just reaching people anywhere we could, even at home.
Great. And I know that the tagline of your nonprofit is empowering people through gardening. Can you share a little bit about how gardening is empowering?
Absolutely. There is nothing like growing your own plants. I'm not even going to say just food, but if you put a marigold seed in the ground and when you get that little sprout, the excitement that happens. So, oh, there's my babies. So imagine if you are a child and you put a radish, tiny, tiny little radish seed in the ground, and within 30 days, you're able to pull that out, harvest it, eat it, because trust me, they will eat it covered in soil. They will still eat it. And that excitement is just contagious, and it is empowering, because we're saying to them, you don't have to depend on the supermarket. You don't have to pretend on your state. You don't have to even depend on your school if you want food. we're letting them know, you as a child, you can put these seeds into the soil, you can plant them, you can tend to them, they will grow into food that will nourish your family, nourish your body, nourish your minds. And you have this power. And then what we can do is take them and extend that and say, now you can harvest that seed. You can save that seed so your family always has it, so you always have it. And you can take this knowledge that you have about growing a plant, growing this food, and you can turn that into a career. So being able to take kids, like I say, from seed to seed, it's pretty amazing. And we really found out that we were inspiring kids to take control and be empowered about their futures. I started this in 2014, 2015 at my elementary school. Like I said, I retired in 2019, but we had 5 schools in the district, and the entire district got involved. This was just at the first, second, and third grade elementary school. So we had a pre-KK. The 1, 2, 3 was where I was. There was a 4th, 5th, and 6th grade building. There was the 7th and 8th grade building, and then there was the high school. So to have an entire school district become involved and have some of my former students who are in high school and all come over and want to work in the garden, and now I see that these kids are going to college for green industry jobs, green industry careers. It's amazing. And I still have a kid who will every year call me and sell me seeds at a very marked up price, but I will buy them from him every single year. He's a senior in high school now, but it's wonderful to see that it really does empower these kids. All you have to do is put it into their hands.
Oh, that's amazing. Great. Kashon, congratulations to you and Cultivators. In the last year, you presented at the Children in Nature Network Conference, where we first met, and bonded over PTO stories, and being leaders of that organization. You also received a micro grant from Communitas America and entered into a partnership with Trust for Public Lands all in 1 year, while being a active parent and having a full-time job and starting your own nonprofit. So congrats to you. Can you tell us a little bit more about Cultivators and the programming you're doing with school-age children in the Bronx?
Sure. So we with Cultivators, what I like to tell people when they ask what this work is about, I tell them that our goal is to use green spaces to create safe spaces. Because in doing research, I found that there's something, and I think we all can agree to it on the call, there's something very therapeutic about being in the garden and being in nature. So for me, I try to use green activities, and the idea is to be outside, but if we could be around nature, that's great. I like to use that as a way to like get kids talking. In this borough in particular, there's a crisis going on where there's a campaign called Not 62 because the Bronx falls into like the bottom of it falls into last in every socioeconomical category here in New York State. We're talking income, education, health issues. It all falls dead last. So for me, when we have children, sometimes our kids are kind of stuck with these things. So when I found out that nature can do something where it can open up those conversations and maybe see if we could bring resources into the home, I kind of went down that path. So with Trust for Public Land, that project started actually from the conference. When I was in the conference with you all last year, Tiffany from Trust for Public Land was there as well, and we connected. And when we got back here to New York, she spoke about a community impact grant that they have every year. And it's a grant where they award $20,000, and the goal is to write something that's going to use their green playgrounds and do programming. They love the idea of this workshop that we did with kids where we read a book. It was called Hold Them Close. And it was authored by author Jamila Thompson Bigelow. She wrote this story about how she loved her black son. It was right after the murder of George Floyd. So the idea was that she wanted to uplift him and empower him and say to him that, you're seen, you're loved, and you're heard. And we used that book as a way to lead a discussion around what are some things that you want to hold close to you that you love, and maybe what are some things that are kind of hurtful, or, things that may have been traumatic in the past. And we used that. We did a terrarium class. It was a big hit. It was something that I still get asked about to this day. And when we led the proposal with the grant for that, we got the grant. It was the first time that that grant was awarded in New York City. It's been awarded in other states, but it was the first time that it happened here. So what we did was we designed a like an 8-month program where we would pair, and I have a partner. She's not on this call, but Cassetta Gleason. She has an organization called Wildflower Books where she loves. She's doing books and nature, so it was kind of like a match right there. So what we do is we have an author, if we can, come in and read their book, and then we pair with the nature activity. So this picture right here, this was a fun day. It was a chaotic day, but it was a fun day. The ones here, right? We had an author, Nonika Ramos. She read a book called Best Believe. She came in, read the book to the students, and then we started our seeds to plant outside. So with that type of work, I love it because in the Bronx, we have community gardens. It's a very green borough. It's just that it's hard for people to get to. For me, it gets the kids talking, and I love to hear kids just like communicating in their own language and trying to share things. But also, I'm big on curiosity, and I think that a lot of times when we have kids who never experienced gardening, it's just always fun to see them try something. So in this instance right here, this day right here, actually, this was the first project that we did, which is pro bono. Like, I paid for the money out of my pocket. This is with the PTA. We organized the garden build day at the school. I reached out to the botanical gardens. They came and just volunteered their time. And we just had a bunch of parents and students that we came out and just rebuilt the garden beds, planted seeds. And for a lot of people, even though that they had experience with gardening culturally, they never really done it here in New York City. So that was just a good experience. So for me, it's just trying to figure out creative ways of using the limited space that we have here in New York City and pairing that with other activities to get nature going for people. So it's been a journey. It's been a wild ride. It's been fun though, and I think that one of the things I love about it is that if I could help somebody in any shape, any way, shape, or form in this capacity, I'm all for it. So even in balancing home and family and the not-for-profit and the projects, like, I'll go to bed rested knowing that I could help somebody out in that capacity.
Thanks. You mentioned, this, um, desire and very, I think the word I'm looking for is altruistic need to help others. And it's very commendable. I know that Sonya, you became a master gardener, and I was doing some research about that. And from what I understand, it's a really lengthy process, and part of it includes a commitment to being a community resource for
Yeah,
others. Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
why was becoming a master gardener important for you?
For me, it was the education piece. It was just something that would help extend my learning, because I knew nothing about growing anything. And I was lucky enough that when we had our garden built, we had some superstars in the hort industry or who came and volunteered and did this for us. And our lead was someone who had been on HGTV. And so all I had to do was help coordinate on the school end and then show up and have this built. But when everyone left, I remember sitting on this bench with one of my other teachers, one of my good friends, and I just looked at her and said, "What do we do now?" And I mean, I had zero knowledge. I was taking video and pictures of plants and sending them to our horticulturalists who had come to help the build. Like, what is this? How do I take care of it? So I really had to teach myself quickly, because when you have kids, you don't have the luxury of going, I'm going to just learn this as I go. I had to use this for a school. So I had to learn really fast what everything was, and, was able to do that. But when I retired, because down here in my area where Rutgers is our land grant university, I could only take the class in Camden County, and they only offered it during the day. So as soon as I retired, I called them and said, I'm retired. I want to do the master gardening class. It's a very intensive, like horticultural botany course that you do over a matter of months. And then you have a really intense test. And when I did it, we ran into the pandemic. So I did a lot of distance learning on how to prune trees and different things like that. And we did all sorts of stuff. But the big piece of it um, that they kept reiterating to us was you have to volunteer in some capacity. You have to teach others the material that you've learned. So master gardeners don't just hold on to this information. You pay to learn this information, and then it's your obligation to pass this on and teach others at no cost. Luckily, because I had the nonprofit, I was able to say, can I just combine the two? And they were like, absolutely. Yeah, you can do this. So it just made it even more important for me to make sure that we were providing, and we still do provide gardening lessons to people at no cost. It's really important that we do that, not only as someone who went through the Rutgers University Master Gardening Program, but as someone who believes that the beauty in life and our purpose, no matter who we are, our purpose in life is to give back. One of my favorite quotes is from Christmas Carol, and it's about, when Marley tells Scrooge, mankind was our business. So I always say humankind is our business. You don't get into teaching for a corner office and a bonus. If you do, you're never going to get it. So you get into it because you love people, you love learning. And as long as I get to do that, I think that is the beauty of life. And that's the way you give back for all the good things that have happened and the good things that will continue to come.
Love that. Kashon, you talked a little bit about your the program you were doing with the book. I think I found the right book and put it in the chat. And the book and the gardening project and combining the two. We have parents and caregivers and educators on this webinar who are looking, they're kind of looking for that inspiration and that how to, like, how do I get this into my classroom or into my kitchen or introduce this to my children? Can you share maybe some other misconceptions about gardening or activities that you've done that you've seen be successful with the children in your community?
Sure. I can give one example, something that we did recently, pro bono. So we worked with a school in the Bronx. It was their family night where they wanted to, um, I guess it was a recruitment program or just, I guess, letting the community know like type of programming that they have. And the teacher reached out because she saw the work we were doing on Instagram and asked if we could come in and do a seed starting workshop with the parents. So we said, sure. So we came in and we got a book called The Bronx is My Home. And the book focused on all of the positive things about the Bronx because the Bronx carried like a negative stereotype, unfortunately. So this author wrote a beautiful children's book, well pictured around just the different neighborhoods and different communities in the Bronx. And then from there, because it was a family event, we had parents. So there were parents, there was grandparents, there was aunties, cousins, and they came in and we started seeds with them. So we laid out a bunch of seeds on the table. Um, we had pollinators, we had herbs, we had, different um, vegetables. And we just had a discussion around the Bronx and just kind of started to try to break that negative stereotype around it. Because for me, I feel like I have kids in this borough, and it's unfortunate when they turn on the news, the first thing they see is that something negative about the place that they live. And to me, it's almost like, why even try? If when I get up and I see this, it's not going to work for me. So we led a very vivid discussion around um, the positive things about the Bronx, and then we went into seed starting. And the first thing I told the parents and the students is that we're going to get dirty today. Like, we'll wash our hands when this is over. There's hand sanitizer over there, but we're going to use our hands. Like, we're not going to use gloves. And I think the biggest thing from that was once they saw their parents into it, it kind of broke the it kind of piqued the curiosity because it's like, oh, if my dad is doing this, then let me see what this is, and it worked. So a lot of questions around how to keep this going because they didn't want to just plant the seed and go home. They wanted to continue. They wanted to see, the sunflower. The sunflower was a hit for some reason, but they wanted to see the sunflower continue to grow. So it was having that discussion with them, giving them my information in case they had any additional questions around it. But I think that conversation where you can invite everybody to the table may help with that because sometimes kids are reluctant, and just my experience, even dealing with my own kids, sometimes they're reluctant. But if they see someone that they trust also trying the same thing, I think that kind of breaks some of uh, the reservations, the hesitations around it. So for me, that was something I remember because even though it was like a very quick event, it was just so dope to see a lot of just like parents getting into it. And like, the Bronx is a melting pot. So there's a lot of different cultures in this borough. So you just start hearing the stories about, what they would grow when they're back home in the Dominican Republic, or, if they're in Ghana, what was growing in Ghana or what was growing in Jamaica. So you start to hear those stories too, and it's like, okay, like there's a connection here. And it's like it's all because of gardening. So for me, that lesson with like having parents or caregivers around, to me, I thought helped that workshop work the way that it did.
That's a great tip, getting the parents involved, so that they can be an example and a trailblazer. Do you have any advice, Sonia, for people who are looking to start gardening with their kids or their classrooms?
Do it. I mean, like, absolutely do it. Um, it's so great listening to Kashon. Like, my dad's from the Bronx, so I have this affinity for the boroughs, So, and listening to him talk about how, culturally and getting how it's this melting pot and getting the adults involved. And I think that is such a magic piece is when your parents really enjoy something, they can pass that on to their kids. And we don't give kids as much credit as they deserve. Kids are really the game changers in everything. They really are. One of the things that we did is we sold it to the kids like it was that middle shelf of cereal. And it was the Lucky Charms and all the sweet sugary stuff. And then the kids sold it to their parents. But I think if you just show the kids what you're going to do, let them be outside. Who cares about the distance between the carrots or what bulbs you're planting? You can go fix that later if you have to, but don't put that on your kids. Just let them see the joy that starts to come from it. I saw Kashon like nodding his head too. Like once you start putting restrictions and barriers onto a child, you're telling them no. You're telling them you're not doing this correct. So what is a kid going to do? I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this, especially from my background where I've spent 25 years working with children with learning differences and with different types of neurological differences who were always used to hearing no. So I don't care if you take that pack of carrots and you pour it in one spot. I'm going to come behind it later on when you're, when you're at home or when you've gone to bed or whatever it is. And I'm going to plant these a little more correct because I do want them to grow and I want you to have that success. And then when they sprout, we're going to have a celebration. When they're ready for harvest, you're going to have a celebration. You put the child in the center. And so many times adults put themselves in the center, but put the child in the center. Keep them at the center of everything that you plan, everything you want to do. When I was teaching, the kids literally planned the garden. In computer class, whenever they went to computer class, like around the beginning, like when we start planning our gardens out, I would have this list that I would put into our school's network, and the kids would vote on what they wanted. We had a garden team that was led by the third graders, and they actually came up with questions, lists of seeds, like everything. And it was theirs. So we gave them full ownership. and they loved it. They started teaching everyone else how to do it. And that's why we have kids that are still gardening. That's why we have families that are still gardening, because we really put it in the hands of the children. So yeah, who cares? Let them plant stuff incorrectly. Nature's going to do what she do. It will grow. Trust me, it will grow.
And if I can piggyback on something that Sonya just said, which kind of, I was shaking my head because I agree with everything. So like even with like, just let them try it. Like just let the kids drive it, and there's a lesson in there too. Like I think that there's like lessons always in nature, and even thinking about this quote I read from Neil deGrasse Tyson, where he talked about letting kids just try things. That as adults, sometimes we often put restrictions and limitations. So when she was saying that, I was like, I've heard this before, where we have to let our kids just see if it's going to work or not. So like the best advice that I can give is just let them try. Like there's definitely lessons in failure. Like even if it doesn't work out the way you wanted to, there's lessons in that as well too.
Absolutely. That's just what I was unmuting to say. There are huge lessons in failure. And what I would tell the kids, like, oh, well, this didn't make it. Oh, I killed the plant. I'm like, you're not a real gardener unless you kill a plant. Because trust me, I could go show a whole bunch of them that are just dead, but instead of saying, oh, I failed, you go, what can I do? What can I do different? What changes can I make so I can get success? That is a valuable lesson that too often we as adults fail to teach children. How can I make this better? How can I make it a success? So yeah, Kashon, spot on.
In a former life, I was an elementary school art teacher. I think I shared that with you guys. And just like my brain is going now with all of the metaphors and all of the tie-ins to all of the other subjects, and there's really just so much material to work with. While when we were having our initial meeting to talk about this event, that's where the title came from. Just grow, just do it. I tend to be a planner, and I like need to read 7 books first and take a class and like get a spreadsheet started. But sometimes in life, and especially with children, just gotta rip the band-aid off and just do it. So we've had one question come in first, and if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A. But Alma asks, what kind of activities do you guys do during colder months? Does anyone want to take a gander at that?
Yeah. One of the things that we do, you're growing every single month. Gardening can take place every month. So not only are we doing planning and, understanding what are the dynamics of a winter garden in a temperate climate like South Jersey, we are also planting things. There are plants that will grow, that will germinate because they need cold stratification. So breadseed poppies, collard greens, kale, we do a lot of those sort of culturally relevant plants during the winter. Collard greens only get sweeter once they've had a frost. So we want that to happen. And, wheat, there's a winter wheat that you can plant and it will sprout. But even if there's snow, there's different activities that you can do where you talk about spreading seeds on the snow. You're feeding the animals that need it. You're feeding the earth. There's so many lessons that you can do year round that are going to be relevant no matter where you are.
I would say for what we tried this year, because we're working primarily in school gardens in collaboration with the Trust for Public Land. One activity that we did that really worked out well was like vision boarding. So we reiterated to the students that this is your space. Like we're just here to help steward this work. So what we did was I took pictures of their garden. We had a whole presentation around it, and we brought in like just different seeds and different like just flowers and plants, and asked them just to imagine their space, right? And to me that was a way of letting them know that you're in the driver's seat. We're here to respond to you. So I can come in here and map this entire space out for you, but I don't think it would be valuable to you. But if you tell me what it is that you're looking for, we can make it happen. So we read that book, Bronx is My Home, as the first workshop. And then we just had poster boards. We had all different types of flowers, plants, packets of seeds, empty seeds, just so you can see what it is. And we just got different visions of what the students wanted. And I mean, it prompted them to think about things that they've seen when they've gone home, and it was a good experience. Like I think it just to me kind of set the tone for the work we're trying to do, where if we're trying to use this as a safe space, I can't tell you what your space should be. Like you have to create your space. So that was an example of one that we did when it was a colder month. The terrarium class always does well too. To see students, take this small succulent plant and build this entire ecosystem around it and explain how it works, that's always a hit. Like that's always a good activity in the colder months. So you get a lot of creativity, a lot of just questions. It's one of my personal favorites. But yeah, those are some that work for us in this work.
Yeah. Microgreens, growing microgreens with your
Hmm.
kids, growing indoors.
Hmm.
You can grow lettuces, herbs. The growing does not have to stop. Those lessons can continue. And yeah, you can do a lot year round. Resources are out there. If you need more, there are plenty of resources that will help you learn about year round gardening with children.
And what about small spaces? What if, people are like, oh, I live in a city. I only have a small space. What would you recommend that they do to get into gardening with their families or their children?
Um, I would say your windowsill, get your pots. Here in New York we have, yeah, like if you go onto the windowsill, if you find like a nice corner with some good light, just any medium that you could use to plant something, I would just say go for it. I think that sometimes I think Christy, you mentioned it earlier, where we get obsessed with reading the multiple books and watching the multiple videos and doing things like that. It really just trying it. So I think it's a matter of just finding a space that works with some good light and finding a medium, whether that's a pot, whether that's a bucket, whatever the case is, and just start. So I know people who live in small apartments here who have just a corner of their apartment that's just dedicated to just growing a tomato plant, like directly in front of the window. So it's possible. You just have to kind of just try it. And I'm kind of like when you said it, I laughed because I'm kind of like that person too. I want to read everything and get all the research and then be perfect about it. But no, just find you a nice space that with some good light and just go for it.
Absolutely. Down here, we don't have the same type of apartment settings that you would see in New York City. We don't have the high rise. We're very densely populated down here in a different sense. So there are housing developments and apartment developments that might be like 2 stories is your max. But the same, we tell them grow in everything. We show people how to reuse the pots and pans that you have, tin cans, the clamshells that you get from takeout, anything. So we show people how to use the trash that you have around your house that you can repurpose and grow on your stoop, like Kashon said, in your windowsill, or just in a spot that gets a lot of sun. So we let people know that there are a multitude of ways. And then one thing that we have in this area, most communities have at least one community garden. And, we think that that's really important because if you don't have any type of space, or like we found that there were even some people who were not allowed to grow plants for some different reasons, they could go to their community garden. So yeah, it's a good resource. And anytime you want to grow, there's always a way.
Thanks. We've had another question come into the chat. Heidi says, I may have missed you saying this early on, so apologies if you already covered it, but have you both noticed improvement in your students' or children's ability to focus on other topics during the school day as a result of being engaged with the gardening? I see head shaking.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I moved back outside, so it's a little windy. When I did my graduate thesis on the benefits of gardening and with children with disciplinary needs. So we took kids who were high flyers, um, and high flyers were the kids who were at the principal's office on a regular basis, kids who were regularly tardy, kids who were regularly absent, and we started, special garden clubs. And the whole thing was, you didn't know what day your your class or your group was going to have club, and also you were assigned your own plant, so you had your own thing you had to grow. If you weren't there, no one else took care of your plant. It was your responsibility. And out of the 12 kids that I had in my first group, only one child did not make it through the entire program. So we saw sharp increases in attendance, in kids coming to school on time, in science, in math, because we were incorporating these. And in reading, we were incorporating all of these things into the curriculum and into gardening. So we really made this seamless partnership go throughout. So in order for kids to get the joys out of the garden, they had to do their schoolwork, they had to be in school, and vice versa. So it really made a huge difference in our school, where we had a major problem with these issues.
Yeah, to Sonia's point, it reminds me of a story where when we did this terrarium class for the first time in the school, it was in a school area where there's a lot of socioeconomic issues that are occurring in the Bronx. And I didn't notice until after the fact, but when we did the terrarium class, all the kids were engaged, actively building their terrariums, reading the book, just having full conversation. Because the Hold and Close book covered empowering a young black boy. One of the things that came up was a conversation with one of the students where we didn't know this at the time, but they had told me this student had like behavior issues, that he would come into the class, he would be not be regulated, often being disruptive. They found out in that terrarium class that he witnessed someone being murdered. I think it was someone in his family, immediate family, being murdered. Once that conversation happened, now they were not able to address that because it never been shared before. And from there, they was able to see that there was an improvement. So now when you came into the class, you now understand that he's holding something that's very traumatic. And now that you know that information, you can now address him differently, to where it wasn't like, we don't know what's going on. And now you found out just from building a small terrarium in a 45-minute class. So there's power. There's definitely power in nature. That's why we're all on this call. So to Sonia's point, I definitely agree that there's definitely improvements, and that was something that I was seeking when I went to the conference last year, was just meeting people to understand, like, how can I articulate that if you introduce nature to our students, you'll see a better version of themselves, or see their true version of themselves in a much calmer environment. So it's just so many different ways. But yeah, to your point, I definitely have witnessed that.
Yeah, when you have kids who are holding on to so much, I mean, because we've had the same down here. And I mean, kids are kids, and kids go through a lot of trauma, a lot, and things adults could never make it through. And these kids are living through this more regularly than we care to say, that we care to appreciate and notice. But there's one thing that I always said to my kids, like, you can't be in a bad mood and garden, because there are things in the soil that make you happy. And if you garden, you can't help but to be happy. So, I had little ones. So they were like, I can be happy touching soil. So I used to have a giant bin that was in my classroom. And when I do some workshops, I still carry a bin of soil with me. And I'll say, if you're not in a good mood, just everyone come put your hands in the soil, and we have to squish it, because we do know scientifically that there are microbes in soil that help release endorphins and serotonin and make you happy. If you are living in a world where you don't get to engage with this, think of it as adults, how you feel when you have a headache, you've had a stressful day, you just want to go outside. You just want to take a walk. You want to sit on your porch or your patio or something. Why? Because our bodies crave nature. And so many times as adults, we are keeping children away from what their bodies need. So if we do this and let them do this, we're able to have more regulation and balance with our children.
So the gut, you think it's gardening, but it's really
It's
really
science.
it's science, it's mental health, it's
It's
physical
everything.
education, it's social
It's
studies, math.
everything. It's life. Gardening is life. And if you garden, you're going to have this deeper appreciation and love for just life. It's incredible. Right, Kashon?
I agree with everything. Everything. I totally agree with that. I can't stress it enough. And I was even thinking about my experience at the conference last year where in this work it's kind of lonely when you're trying to yell it here in New York City because while we have green spaces, we don't really honor and value it. So when I went to the conference that met you all last year, it was just so refreshing to meet people who are all thinking the same way. Like who we all know in our different forms and walks of life that there's something about nature and science that we need and that we're going as far away from it for some reason, but we need to get back to it. So it's just refreshing. Like even this call now is just like a reminder that like as I try to continue this work here, that it's not it's necessary work because we're all on the call discussing the same thing and best practices. So
True. I mean, one of the things that we talk about at the Children in Nature Network too is, of course, we want everyone, we want to connect everyone with nature, but the focus we have is on children because the hope is that if a children is connecting with nature, they're a parent or a caregiver or grandparent is coming along for the ride, and that if the child appreciates nature from an early on, they'll become stewards. And Sonya talked a bit about that and some of her students continuing to become stewards and getting into, green careers, which is awesome. And, just having that understanding. I mean, even with my kids, sometimes like they just think these things like magically appear on their dinner plates, like someone grew that, like give appreciation. Like that did not just like fall out of the sky onto your plate, so having them understand, how these things work and all the people involved. And, it's just so important for them to have that experience and later on that appreciation. So we're almost out of time, but I see one more question that came in. Let's see. Do you have any? Tara asks, do you have any advice for gardening activities and settings where the kids won't necessarily be able to follow up with the garden over time? For context, I work in early education at a zoo, and a lot of our kids are only here for a single visit. So the terrarium workshop comes to mind. Any other maybe single activity?
Yeah, there's a lot you can do. I had an opportunity to work with Philadelphia Zoo here, and what we did was develop different types of observational activities for kids. And there's one part of at the zoo where kids can actually touch some of the plants. We use a lot of natives, and if you start just talking nature with kids, have different observational activities for the different seasons. So kids can see what happens when something is starting to sprout and maybe make a guess about, well, what's it going to look like, and do a follow through. I mean, you can easily do a follow through, whether it's on your social media, because these kids are savvy, or even if it's something where kids can touch, kids can pick, kids can do rubbings. There are so many different things that you can do in engaging children where they can actually, take part, especially in understanding how important certain plants are to life, to wildlife. That's a huge thing. And, if you have plants and then you can connect these seeds with these plants and say, here's our local birds. This is the plant that gives them this food. Here's what the seeds look like. And then you can develop activities around the seed and around the plant and start building that appreciation for, the nature that is in your local area, and that your native animals or global animals, but most likely your native animals, will need.
I think for me, one that comes to mind is something that I've tried to workshop it before, but it's a workshop I call composting your feelings. Where we're trying to use, recyclable material, whether it's like a milk carton box or just some type of container that you can find, in the school or in the community, and kind of using it as a way to kind of drive home a conversation around like maybe, kind of what you're going through. Like maybe there's something, maybe you failed a test, maybe you lost a relationship, like whatever the case is, and kind of using that as a way to maybe showing that if you um are going through that, you can, like kind of flip that into like a positive. So we would use paper that's going to like break down into the soil safely. And then from there, we would have like seeds that we would know that would grow. So it'll give them kind of like the conversation around how to deal with your feelings. And as someone told me, not getting rid of them, but learning how to manage them, how to manage your feelings. And from there, you would actually see that you'll come out the other way, and then you're seeing like something grow as a result of it. So that might be something too. And then it's a take home, right? So they could take that activity, they could take that plant home, and maybe that'll start the conversation to the garden, where they'll find a pot or a place to grow it.
Love that. Well, sadly, we are at the top of the hour, but Sonya and Kashon, thank you so much for sharing your time and talents today and every day,
Thank
and all
you.
of that you
Thank you.
do on a daily basis to connect children with nature. Um, Muchly, greatly appreciated. And for our attendees, just so you know, a recording will be sent out to all of the people that registered for this event. In about 2 weeks, we'll send that out. We'll also put the recording on our website, in our resource hub, and on our families page, so that you can access that at any time. And mark your calendars. The Vitamin N Challenge kicks off on June 1st. You can learn more about that on our website. Amelia will share a link in the chat. And thank you all for attending. I wish you all a great nature-filled weekend, and hope that you get your hands dirty. I think that's going to be my goal for this weekend. Get some dirty hands. Get some microbes in me.
Absolutely.